we're going to talk about this 109-acre piece in Muskingum County. It's just south of Zanesville. I'll let Ben kind of give his 2 cents, but my opening thoughts on this farm is there's not other farms that we've walked or that I've walked or that we've renovated and resold. There's nothing to me that starts with a better deer genetic pool and huntability scenario than this farm does. I mean, this farm is already like, if you bought it tomorrow and didn't touch it, climb in a tree, tell me I'm wrong, climb in a tree like November 5th through the 15th, you will kill a mature deer on this farm. Like, and they already live there. So it's to me, it goes without saying, this one is already really good. And I think you'll see once Ben gets into it, kind of our plan is not to blitz the farm. It's not to go in and overdo it because it's already really good. We're just going to try and make improvements to it. But Ben, what's your initial thoughts on this piece?
Well, it's definitely Bucky. It's one of those pieces that it doesn't have a lot, it has zero ag, it has, no natural food source other than browse and, thickets and, stuff like that and acorns. Not even a real good, decent field close to it. But these are the kind of properties I feel like in some of this country down there where some of these bigger bucks and mature bucks end up living or, reverting to because they can be left alone. The neighbors all have kind of tough access into this. And, like if you're looking at my map, those off-colored, there's two sections that are off-colored that I consider sanctuaries. That like you just wouldn't, we try to just not go into them. Like we'll just leave them alone as much as possible. Typically, I don't like to put a sanctuary on property line edges, like the one to the north and east. But the reason I did it that way on this piece was because the huntability of this property that somebody would buy is very hard on that north and east edges, because it sinks down in, it's hard to access, but the landowners to the other side also have hard access. So I feel like they would be pushing the deer, a little bit more. So I wasn't too worried about putting a sanctuary closer to the neighbor's property. Our idea was to try to pull those deer from these sanctuaries to this huntable spots that we have picked out. That was kind of my plan. But I did make the one sanctuary right exactly in the center of the property, with a food source, to the south that you could easily access. So that's kind of what my plan is there. But this property just has a lot of contour features. It's going to have different groups of bucks. One thing I will say about deep woods bucks like this down in that country, just like you can see that one buck that Javen was just showing some trail cam pics where that buck came in and he turned and bolted the top left there. Watch, as that buck sees that camera, he is out. Like, and that's what that's about. Like that buck, he saw that camera and it freaked him out. So don't let trail cameras always be like the deciding factor whether you think you have a big buck in a spot or not, because in a state like Ohio where baiting is legal, a lot of times deer have really bad experiences with bait and cameras or food plots and cameras, and they get shot or shot at or wounded. So like that deer obviously knows something's up with that. Wouldn't you guys agree? I mean, it's almost like the
Yes.
second he saw it, he's like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, and Ben, I'm interested in your thoughts too, because I know that there are tons of folks, friends of mine as well. I can assert to you guys here that was a Tacticam reveal camera, and I have seen this on my own farm with some of my Tacticams. That I think the video mode somehow, I don't know if it emits a sound or it emits a frequency, or I don't know, but there's a lot of debate I've seen recently in the past year in the hunting industry with video mode on cellular cameras. And I will say it that way. video mode on cellular cameras. That there is something, because that deer, and Brian Tanner, he's close to there and was helping Russ, the old owner of this farm, kind of keep it up and huntable. And he said the same thing. You got to turn those things off of video mode and or off of cellular. And so I don't know. What's your thoughts? Have you seen that before on video mode specifically?
I've seen deer like pick their head up and like say they're working a scrape or something like that, then all of a sudden they kind of like stop and kind of look at the camera and you can see their ears twitching. But
Yep.
I've never had it spook a deer yet, but I definitely think that there's something to that. And I don't know that it's any specific brand. I just think there's something the way that that works, that it's emitting some kind of, you know, there has to be something. Well, even like in your, sometimes when you request a video or you get a video back or your video downloads and you watch it, sometimes you can hear a humming,
Right.
you know, um,
I've
or something
definitely
different.
I've had it happen with other camera brands as well. And I often on those specific properties, or if there's I feel like different deer groups are different and react different to some of that stuff from my experience. And if I have a property that a certain buck, even down to individual bucks, do that or see my cameras, I just resort to putting them high and getting them out of sight. Is often what
Mhm.
I've done to try to avoid that.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
I'm sure I have an idea of where that is on that farm that picture was taken, or that video, and I'm pretty sure that camera was really low, really obvious, like in your face when you come down the trail type of stuff. So you're right, Ben. Definitely probably freaked that deer out, but I
But
I
it's still
know as
proof that
well.
they're there, you know.
You're right, and I know that deer was only on certain parts of the farm ever. So like you said, there's deer groups and there's ecosystems of deer, even on a big woods tract like that, where we would all just think, the deer are going everywhere, which they are in the rut. But I think you're right. You're going to see multiple herds live there on different parts of the farm and kind of have intersecting and overlapping areas, or zones, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So do you
Yep.
want to dive into, if we start almost even at the entrance, or how would you want to drive this, Ben,
Yeah.
if we're going to have you drive and talk about the pins?
Let's start at the parking lot and we'll just, it's not really a parking lot, but let's just start, where the gate is, where we parked that day, and head up that hill.
Yep.
The one thing, just real quick, Javen, go back to the topo you just were showing, because I meant to do this and I forgot to do it. But you can see how the dark face there of that hill, the first hill that you come to, right there. Go to the right, Javen. Yep. Now, the only thing is up on that flat on that side, you could have a
Yep.
stand. See where the property line meets and that ridge makes a bend between the neighbors right there. You could almost
Yep.
set about right where Javen's mouth is. You could almost
Yep.
have a stand right there overlooking that hillside flat type deal right there.
Yep.
They're probably going to work that quarter of the way down. That is one area we did not walk, but that is something I do believe deserves attention. So you might want to drop a marker there, Javen, at some point, like a stand or something.
Yep. One of the cameras Russ had and stand locations was probably a little higher than that, up in that where the contour line's a little sharper. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
I
And
mean,
I honestly
somewhere up in
wondered.
there, you'd have to scout it, but you could hunt that you could find an access up that wall. You could, it'd
Yep.
be tough, but that's what you want. You want to be able to pop in on those deer without them knowing,
Yep. Yep. Okay. So and Ben, Justin's bid is to widen that parking area, take all the stumps out, build a nice pad for someone to have, like a, cabin or whatever, something there, shed, lean-to building, whatever, to keep stuff.
Yep. And whoever does do that, like I would recommend that while they're there hunting, keep be quiet. Like, you're there to hunt. Don't be making a big rigmarole, like if you're
Yeah.
trying to, especially if you want to hunt that food plot up there and you want to keep the deer normal, you slide in, you know, use your place to sleep and, whatever, but you're there to hunt, not ride around the whole farm and make campfires. And, there's time for that. But when you're seriously there to hunt, like I wouldn't be making it like you're at a campground.
Yep.
But it's real easy then, because then that path goes up in between there. And that's once it gets up on that flat, that's why we carved that food plot in there. We'll put that food plot in on the left, bedding grasses to the north there to kind of give them some of that soft edge to lay in. And it's actually a little bit bigger than the food plot itself, because I feel that that's going to give that farm a little bit of different vibe than what those deer are used to. And deer love soft grasses to lay in and, bed. It's just different diversity mixed within all that timber and thickness, of the brush and stuff. So I really think that would be a nice add. You'll have to, and, we put the blind to the east side there. So when you're coming up that trail, you literally can pop into that blind or a stand, whichever one you want to put there. And you're not messing, those deer aren't going to really see you. You're going to be there waiting for them when they decide to come out from any direction and come into that food plot to feed or look for does or make scrapes or whatever.
Let me ask you a question real quick. I'm actually meeting our excavation guy there tomorrow to stake out and mark off this area for both the grasses and the food plot. From a input standpoint, would you suggest we go with clover plot here since we're going to be, tearing this up, put the food plot in clover?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of clover. I mean, I really think clover is just an all around good staple, especially for just an all around good plot that's easy to maintain. It takes some mowing and a little bit of spraying broadleaves and grasses, and a guy has a food plot for 5 years if he fertilizes it right. Use some deer grow, liquid fertilizer type deal and lime, and keep your plot in good shape, and you'll have a good clover plot there for a long time, because it's going to get some browsing pressure because those deer aren't used to it being there.
What would you do in the grasses? That was going to be my next question. How would you actually roll those in? If we can get those in with the guys there and the equipment, I'm going to ask Justin for almost a change order of if he can help us get that in. What would you put?
Yeah, I mean, I just would use a mixture of, blue stem, things like that. Some of the cave and rock switchgrass, I feel, gets too stiff and tall to a degree. Like, I mean, you can have some in there, but I'm a big fan of a mixture of grasses. So, like, I'll just say Don Higgins mix with the bedding in a bag, I think is pretty good. One thing I wouldn't be opposed to doing is putting a couple treetops leaving it within that grass. Like once you pop some of those trees out of there, leave some structure, make a couple brush piles or something possibly within the grass. And those deer will bed up against it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
They're like fish. Like we've talked about that on other videos we've done, but it gives them something to lay against. It's not all just, because I do believe a field of just complete, which that's not going to be near big enough, but a giant field of complete switchgrass or like, something like cave and rock or something like that. I think it becomes a desert, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see the deer bedding in it a lot. Like some people, think it's going to happen. And we learned that with my neighbor's property over here. He planted a ton of switchgrass one year, thinking it was going to change his whole farm. And it literally, the switchgrass fields became like deserts. The deer, they would go through them, but they hardly ever stayed in them. But then when we'd find areas where there was a pine tree or brush pockets within the grass, that's where they bedded.
Okay. So, all right. So we want to have a mix in there, but we probably don't want to have any kind of a mix in that bedding grass that's a food source like clover, something like, is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, you're still going to get natural forbs and stuff growing in there that deer are going to eat. And it ain't going to hurt to have some clover in there at all. I scatter sometimes in CRP fields in Illinois. I'll scatter some clover seed within it,
Okay. So, All right, that makes sense. You've got a blind. If we stay with that food plot for a bit, you have a blind on the south, or a stand on the southwest corner of it, it looks like.
Yep. I feel like basically you could give yourself, because the way that contour is, if you go back to the topo, you're getting yourself right on that edge, blowing your wind. Like if you have an east wind, but you know that deer's using that plot. A lot of people say east winds stink. Man, I have killed 3 booners on east winds. Like I don't think that
Yep.
affects them at all. Um, and again, like that could be a spot where like you need to just jimmy up there. You walk across the plot quick, get into your stand, and you're just in it. Or you walk the
Yep.
edge. You stay on the edge, walk all the way around, and hop in and keep the
Yep.
tracks out of the middle of the plot.
So
But
like
there's
an
gonna be
east,
great.
southeast.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you can figure out how you can pop up that steep bank into it, that's just as good. But you got to be a
Yep.
little careful because there's going to be deer bedded on those. That's kind of our plan. You're looking at that sanctuary, the grass. There's going to be deer
Yep.
bedded up in there.
Yep. I agree. Okay, and then we've got the blind, and or a stand there, and then is that a feeder, the yellow dot?
Yeah, like I'm just saying, like if somebody wants to have a feeder there, I believe putting one in that plot area somewhere or close to there is a good area. If they want to run a feeder, they don't have to, but if they want to, that's a good place to put one. The whole
Yep.
idea of this situation here being it's Ohio, like, cause it's legal to bait, and like, let's just not beat around the bush. Your neighbors are baiting. It's just the way it
Yep.
is. Your neighbors are baiting. So if you're not going to have the same amount of deer that they're going to have, no matter what you do. They're going to go to those corn piles or check them out at night or go look for does on them. So you
Yep.
have to somewhat combat that. And like a boss buck feeder right there, is a great place. And the whole idea of putting the plot right here is what I call feeding them forward. You're bringing them to you instead of trying to have to implement and go through the whole farm. Like so many people just blow through the farm to get to the back and hunt back there. Well, when you have your own dirt or a place you can do something with, manicure it to make it to where you're making the deer do what you want them to do.
Yep. Well, the other thing I would say about feeding is having, been uh, a deer feeder in Ohio for almost 20 years now. It's a lot of work if you're going to be consistent. It's a lot of work. And what I've always hated with certain feed setups or feed locations is like you just said, if you get them really deep into your farm, they may make sense in the rut as a cool place for a buck to get downwind of a feeder and check a doe, but they don't make sense in January when it's sloppy and nasty and you're trying to keep a feeder full. They do not make sense. They're
Yeah.
dangerous. If you're taking 1,000 pounds of corn back there, I've done this myself. It's dangerous. You're tearing the farm up. And I just like having a lot of food in one area. So you've got it there with a food plot and a feeder. The deer know where the food are. It gives them a reason to come to where they're needing to come to, but it's a really low intrusion spot to go fill a feeder. If you do go as a weekend warrior and Saturday you morning hunt until 11 or 12, and then you get out and you want to fill the feeder, you're not going to the back corner of the farm to fill the feeder before you go hunt that evening. The
Yeah.
deer know
Well,
you. They know you're there. They know you've been there.
and we do have 2 other spots picked out. Like one is in the very back, but the whole idea of that was to monitor to see like if I was an owner, I would want to see like is there different bucks that prefer different
right,
spots? Because you may get a
right.
buck that prefers this front one. You may get one that prefers the one in the very back where the spider section is.
Yep,
Basically, those are all like trails back there where they crisscross all around that spot back there. Um, and I put the feeder more to the north just to kind of get it away from the blind area or your stand area, just to have it in the general area. You're not hunting over the feeder.
yep,
But it's a great spot to monitor to see what's going to be back there. And it can help you pick if you need to be hunting some of these other stands locations or a different spot in between that you may decide to put a stand yourself to see what the deer are doing. But it tells you where a deer is at, because if them does are using that feeder, them bucks are going to come by. They just are.
yep,
you know
yep. No, I have no problem with that one back there either. Because as we dive deeper into the property, the other thing I like about that one is it's up high. It's on a flat. I'm just not a huge fan of feeders on like benches and halfway down a steep slope like I used to be, because they're just terribly hard to fill. And to me, if you're not willing to be consistent at several periods of time throughout the year that you need to be consistent, you're hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself. So I have no problem with that one either, because a part of these roads I want you to dive deeper too is we're paying our excavation crew not just to go in and mow these logging roads, we're paying them to make them quiet and clean access, because this is a big woods farm. We're paying them to
Yeah.
cut grade, water bars, all these things, because that's what I would want if I was going to go back there on a side by side with 1,200 pounds of corn in the back and another buddy and a step ladder to fill up a 1,200 pound boss buck. I don't want to go back there on the side of a hill on a side by side in the middle of January. We're trying to prevent that kind of stuff too. If you want to talk through
Yeah.
that.
Yep. You need to be able to sneak in the dark in the mornings to be able to get like to these ridges back there, because there's going to be some phenomenal morning hunting in some of these spots, and you need to be able to get in quiet. And you may decide that you need to, make a walking trail off this purple road somewhere to get up on that ridge, even in different spots. And I would recommend taking a rake or something and cleaning yourself a trail to get up in there, because these woods deer are so in tune to what they hear. They know the difference. But like this road, we want it to be e-bike accessible. Like that's kind of our thoughts. Like an e-bike in a spot like this is just really key to get back that far in there, not all sweated up. You're fast getting in there. You're not laying foot tracks on the ground. You're in and out.
Yep.
Coming in and coming out, it's quicker. Just a lot less intrusion factor, in my opinion. And it's just as effective to be able to hunt those deer that way.
Well, and quickly, Ben and I can assert that you can e-bike that whole farm, because we
Oh yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Prior to the roads having been cleaned up. I was back the other day taking all the pictures, fully e-biked. Quick plug for e-bikes of Holmes County. I have been really impressed with my two-wheel drive e-bike. I mean, it's probably one of my favorite tools. So yes, on a farm like this where you think, well, we need to have side by side ability. It's not to say you couldn't do that, but I'm sure you and I would say if you're giving me the option of side by side or ATV versus an e-bike, I'm e-bike all day, on
Yeah.
every
Now,
one of those tens.
you have to be a little bit, because that first hill takes a little bit of pedaling. Um, even that Baku with the two-wheel drive, it didn't struggle at all. But if you just pedal a little bit, it just makes it go right up that hill like it's nothing. Like
Yep.
a single rear
Yep.
wheel drive e-bike you're gonna work yourself getting up that hill. So like, but my thought is too, like a guy could even walk a bike up that little first hill if he needed to. And then once he gets up in
Yep.
there, he can fly to the back. The
Yep.
rest of it's super
Yep.
simple, except for the ridge going up to that back feeder where the point is there. You can see, that's actually probably a tad bit steeper than the first one. Wouldn't you say, Tyler?
Maybe, but the thing that I think Justin will do a great job with on the first one is just smoothing out some of the rough areas. And obviously, for a bike, that is what kills your momentum, is when you're switching tracks, and bouncing around. So I'll be interested to see how he is able to make that work. Obviously, if he hits rock, he can't go deeper to cut more grade, but I think he'll do a good job with it. I mean,
Yeah.
I I think that if you had a two-wheel bike, you're fine on everything on this. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that one ridge is a little steeper. It's just smoother, where it's big woods. It was covered in leaves. It was just kind of a smoother ride than that main road.
Yeah. Coming down's no problem.
Yeah. So, all right, we've got the middle sanctuary. Talk about that west stand. You've got to stand there on the west, on that inside corner of the property line. And for
Yep.
those of you watching, obviously, I think it goes without mentioning, but we drew the property line in. This is the prospective property line for the 109 acres, and we also have a survey for that. So that's a nice thing that we don't always get with these farms, but we've got a fresh survey, so you'll know where you're at.
Yeah, that stand where the marker is right now, the Javen's marker, that's
Yep.
what I call I would call it the bridge. It's basically a natural land bridge that crosses. I mean, it was man-made, but it literally crosses across that water.
Yep.
Um,
And you'll have to
and
move that pin, go a little east with it,
yes,
and you'll
just a
see.
little more. Yeah, right. Yep. Keep going.
Keep going. See that
Quite a bit.
clear cut?
Yeah.
Keep
About right there.
right there.
There.
Yep.
Yep.
There's the road coming off. Yep. So basically, right there is that land bridge.
Yep.
Can you pull that pin in real time, or do we need to just edit it?
Here.
If you click on it, you can hit edit and move it, or you can hit move actually. Actually, just click off the X, Javen, and go back to it. Click on it again right
I
there.
got you. Move.
See
Yeah.
where it says move. Just move your marker over and pop.
That's it.
There it is.
Yep. Yeah. So talk about that one, man.
So
that
basically,
one's,
like that is a hot spot. Like you got to have a camera there. That is one of those spots. It could be early or pre-rut, whatever. Deer are going to walk that like crazy. It's just going to happen, and we're going to make that access from the parking lot where that purple road goes out to the parking lot. It's going to be so easy for you to get in there to hunt that piece too. So you're going to have to be careful to not overhunt it, because for one, the deer are going to want to use that road too, because they like to cross the road out there, the actual, the vehicle road. I noticed when me and Tyler were there that day, a lot of deer
yep.
crossed that road going back and forth, and they were walking that edge. So we had talked about like using a water feather boat or something like that in the water, and you could like boat back so you're not leaving a track.
I totally would, man. I totally would. If you can zoom in like you did, Javen, on that pin that you just moved, you can actually see. I like this about DeerCast. It's a really high quality picture when you get in there. Yeah, you can see if you study it. The gray overlay makes it a little harder, but to the west of there is the biggest body of water, and then to the east of that pin, you can see the sliver of water. And Ben's basically got the sanctuary on the uphill side of that sliver of water. That sliver goes probably 200 yards, 250 yards if you keep following
Yeah.
it. Yeah, right to about there. You could leave yourself a little John boat or, yeah, like a feather boat, whatever, kayak, whatever you're comfortable with. You could leave it right there at the head, and you would prevent 200 yards of ground scent. And we're also talking 200 yards of, I don't know, 15 scrapes on that road that we're going to clean
Yeah,
up. It
they
was probably
had it
15
just
scrapes.
destroyed. Yeah, they
So
had
I
it.
would hate to walk it that much. I would hate to walk that road and burn it that much. If you could glide around there and get in that body of water, I think, and then pop up into your stand. Oh, that's one of those
You
magical
literally could
stands.
park your boat. Literally could park your boat under the stand we picked out.
Yep.
And
Base
that's
of the
where, and
tree.
I don't know if anybody's ever seen those water feather boats that Jeff on our team makes. Dude, those things you can pull them with an e-bike. They're so light. Like they're ridiculously light. I think it weighs 55 pounds or something.
Yep.
And you can put a little electric motor on it and just zip in and out of there like it's nothing. And they're you can't hardly tip them. So
yep.
you can
I
throw all
think
your
that would make
equipment
that
in
spot that would just make it killer, because the way back there is pretty narrow on that little ridge top. The deer are going to figure you out the more you go back there, and that's one of those spots. Ben, you're right. Anybody buying this farm is going to want to camp out in that stand, because you just know it's a matter of time that a buck's going to cross that water bridge. You'll have to be careful, because you'd burn it out if you're not really particular on how you get in it.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And then if you go to the north again, Javen, so I call that the bridge to Terabithia. But if you go north to the
bridge
left,
to Narnia.
Yeah. So that bottom stand right there, that is basically around the horn of that. If you go to the topo, people will be able to see it. Like where that ridge, there's a huge, nice, flat, big 2 benches down there that make a nice kind of a flat area. You can see how much wider those contour lines are. Those bucks are going to run that like mad down in there. Just going all over the place. So that is, again, one of them spots that You got to be careful you don't overhunt it, but we're making that access to where you're probably going to have a 30, 40-yard walk to your stand max. And you could get away with hunting it a little more, but that is a killer all day spot to sit.
Let me ask you this too, Ben. Javen, we're pushing you all around the map, but if you went so south of that stand, Ben, do you think if a guy was dedicated enough and they would run their boat through the pond down there, could they come up that ditch between those two contour lines? Could they come up from the south to that stand?
Yeah, I'm not saying you couldn't. It just, I remember that day it was fairly thick. You would have to probably do some work, but I also feel like
in the off
deer,
season.
Yeah, and I also feel like deer could be bedded on those little
on
knobs.
that point. Yep.
Yeah,
that makes
that's
sense.
what I was trying to somewhat avoid. But if you did it early in the morning, it could be the key.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, gray light where you can kind of see, going up through there. Or do you mean like dark?
Yeah, either. But like where Javen's marker is right now, like where that ditch stops between the road and the next hill and there's probably a good crossing right there. So you may decide you need to move your stand a little, but these are all just really good suggestions of where to start.
Yep. And if you remember, Ben, those two knolls right there where his cursor is, those were a pretty good little white oak patch in there. If you look up from the pond, if you guys are on this property and you look up from that pond up behind it, those hills are really thicker area of white oaks in there, which obviously is nice. The other thing I love about that stand, Ben.
Go ahead.
What is it?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing I like about that stand is if you go north of it, like to the northwest property line, that pond and that hollow right there, yes, it swings deer around that pond. It swings them onto that bench. Right in there is good too. See how that water comes right to the property line. It's making the deer, they're going around it. And that's where we saw a lot of that sign in there. And that's going to bring them to that stand.
100%. And then I don't know if you can see more to the north or not on that map or not, Javen, but there's a lake, another pond on the neighbors.
Yep.
It's like a swampy pond right there, that bigger body of water. That guy's property is literally, the way his property lines are, that body of water keeps them from coming to the back. Like he has zero access without crossing that water to get to our property line there. So like you virtually have no, I don't know, there's not much going on right back there, as far as people pressure. There was an old blind down in that corner right there where that marker is. There was a old wooden gun blind from years ago down in there. Not saying people still don't use it, but those people got to work to get to those spots.
Well, and they were probably the owners of what we're on now, would have to be that. Well, was that on their property or it was barely on ours?
It was actually on the neighbors. It was right on that corner.
Okay.
But it was an old slab blind or something, but
that makes that feeder back there even better too, just because you're going to have deer that, that's their food source if they're not leaving that huge block.
Yeah, there's a lot of woods and cover swampiness to that northwest that is going to come to that ridge, and they're going to, and like those trails, like the feeder is up top, but most of your deer activity is actually on either side of the main ridge. Like we always talk about, a quarter of the way down or 3/4 of the way up. Them deer just love to work that, but we're trying to pull them to the top to keep your access and scent good.
Yep.
But that's why the first stand down there at the bottom to the left, at the bottom of that point, I feel like that's a really great stand, especially on a morning where you got high thermals, cold in the morning and your thermals are rising and you got to about 10:30 to hunt before your wind starts to drop or, swirl around too much. Can be a really, really killer spot.
Yep. So, and that's the potential. I can't swear to this while we're on this video conference. So if you're watching this, we can't swear to this about the blinds, but we are actively working with Redneck on Placing a bulk order. So, if the blinds don't physically go on here and we work out something, if you are an interested party and you want blinds, of course, we could work that out in the sales process with the farm. But a blind back there would be an awful nice all day sit gun, setup or something for, especially
No,
for kids
that
or
spot back
youth
there with a
weekends.
gun, you're going to see a long ways.
Yep. Yep. When the leaves are off, first gun
That's a,
season, that'll be a
that's a
really
really,
killer spot.
yeah, really beautiful ridge back there.
So go to the next ones that would be southeast of that, and I think that's that natural, just kind of pinch. Javen, there's two stands there. Yep, those two. If you turn your topos back on, I'm thinking, Ben, that's where that ridge just kind of
That's the low
pinches the
gap.
two down. Yep.
Yep, that's the low gap, basically. Saddle. It's kind of like a saddle, which even, Tanner thought that was a great spot. We do too. I put two stand locations so you get hunted on either wind, right there. Because I feel like,
Yep.
you need to have a spot. Like, that's a spot where you want to run a camera and monitor to see what's actually moving through there. Because it may not be as much as you think, or it may be more than you think. And so
Yep.
that's a spot where you definitely want to run a camera and then decide how you want to hunt it, with your stand locations there. But the one stand to the left of the road literally will blow your scent right down the ravine.
Yep. Which
That would be also.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. The question I have for you, and maybe you're already going to go there. I am always scared of stands that are like really deep into your farm, like October evenings, like real deep because you're like your thermals start dropping. But to me, that is an ideal spot where your thermals are going to fall down into that ditch on an October evening type hunt. Is that something you would hunt there in that time of the year?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Your biggest problem is you're going to have to decide at that point which road do you take out it in the evening. Because if your food plot up front is loading up with deer and by the feeder, you got to get out and you could be really messing yourself up. So if you did hunt it in an evening, you may decide you need to take the path that goes down and, out across the bridge and, whatnot. So, which also means we'll probably have to move that purple road, Javen, just a tad over because it probably changes just a tad right there because it would literally cross where that stand is and then goes up in and then makes
something I was also going to mention. Like, I love properties that set up with road loops instead of going in and out always the same way. I just think it makes so much sense, and to keep the deer guessing. You can do, just because you drive back one way doesn't mean that you're still on the property. The deer don't have to, hear you coming back out to know that you're not there. If you make that loop, you're only driving one way, regardless of what way you're going, and the deer can't pattern you in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Makes it nice for deer retrieval too.
Yeah. Yeah, sure does. Yeah. So Ben, you're saying just shift that purple access road over to match and marry with
just
that
a little
crossing.
Bit. Yeah. Just so it kind of makes sense,
Yep.
So will it follow these contour lines over to the ditch?
Yeah, basically what it does is it crosses, goes up onto that contour, and then it makes the left bend. It just basically needs to be shifted.
It'll probably be about 3 contour lines up if I had to guess, Javen, because obviously you can see that's a pretty high wall on that pond. Yep, right about there. Yeah. It'll probably and then drop down over the hill. But when we clean that up, that's still going to be a really low intrusion setup. And Ben, I'm guessing you would agree that we could kind of match your sanctuary area to the edge of that road or off.
Oh yeah.
But then also tie it into the grass field, tie it into the grassy area of the food plot.
Yep. And you could possibly decide that, like, on that back ridge back there, where that old well site was and stuff. I mean, we may, a guy may decide eventually that he wants to clear some of that and plant grasses back there too, just to give them a little more diverse, feel too. Because they always go and check those spots out. Like, because does will bed in those spots and those bucks go cruising looking for them there.
And you guys can't see my cursor, right? You can't see my cursor moving. I don't think so. Basically, to the right, well, or north of those two stands in that low gap, that right there seems like a wide contour, just barely above them, Javen. I don't remember enough on the property if that could be right where you clear in there. If you don't want the clearing on top of the hill, could you clear it right there? Because that still seems like it's pretty rolling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, it's going to take a guy hunting it. But again, we're doing very minimal. We're doing a lot towards the front, minimal in the back, because these bucks are already there. And sometimes I feel like you can go in and mess it up if you do too much. And that's what somebody has to understand with this property. You know, the least amount of intrusion is going to be the best. You know, do what you need to do, get out, don't overhunt it. This is a gem property. Like, honestly, this is a property I would own and hunt myself. It really is.
100%. I was going to say the same thing, that one hand wants me to sell this really quick just so we don't have to commiserate about hunting it this fall and who gets to hunt first.
Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
part of me is like, well, plans laid out. See you guys.
Yeah. No, it's a good one. It's going to be a good one. Somebody's going to kill a
Yeah.
booner off this one, no doubt.
Yep. So looks like the only other ones we need to cover is on that southwest area, and that's kind of that strip ground pop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another
And
great
that is
access though off the
basically,
county road.
yeah, and it's basically like its own little piece, if you ask me. Like, the bridge to Terabithia does lead up to it, and that's where those deer do walk up in there. So that's why I have a feeder there, because that dirt up there is just shale, nasty
Yeah.
overburden from years ago of, stripping a little bit. So what you're going to have there is very poor soil. Now, you could do things to make the soil better. If you wanted to plant a plot over there, it'd be a great place to have one. But I just have it set up with a feeder right now, and just right off that access road, and your stand or blind up in there, so you can catch those deer coming up into that area. There's a lot of deer up in there that use that. They cross the road, headed into there. A lot of contour and little ditches in that spot. So I think the least amount of intrusion there is the best way to hunt it.
Yep. The thing I'll add is there's a lot of deer coming from the west, from the property on the west of that, because there's also one of those, Javen, if you turn your satellite image back on, there is a strip pond or whatever you want to call it. You can see it in there. If you zoom in, there's a narrow water body in there as well. Yep. It goes all the way through, even on to us. And again, yep, you can see it. It forces the deer to decide which side of it they're going to be on. And there's a lot of activity on that trail that comes from the west into that open area. And I think if we were zooming out and Ben, you were to just draw how do the deer come and go on this farm, I think there's a major travel loop starting there southwest, getting into that shale ground, dropping down to the water bridge, up, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
over.
Oh,
But I
sure.
mean that there's tons of sign coming through there.
Oh, yeah.
So
Lots of it.
that's where when we say I think a lot of people say, well, a farm can hold many herds of deer, and like usually it's a lie. This one's not. This farm, literally, I think you're going to take pictures of different bucks on the back than you ever will in that southwest feeder, right? And the east as well, the central part, the east part of the farm. I just think there's going to be different deer on different
Yeah.
cameras that you never see on other cameras.
Yep. I agree.
So,
Definitely a good
yeah,
piece.
so while we're on this, I'll just kind of go. If you've listened this far, we appreciate it. We just try to do as good of a job as we can with rolling these properties out. Of course, Javen is an incredible content creator, and I think he has an incredible vision to help bring this to life. But just so you guys know, the plan for us as of today with this farm is to clean all the roads up that we've already covered. We're going to add in that food plot and add in that bedding grass scenario, and that's I mean, honestly, that's probably 3 acres. I mean, it's a pretty good little job. So we're going to add that. We're going to likely add the 3 feeders. We're obviously cleaning all the access roads up to these spots. The nice thing about this farm that's not super common is there's good gates already down at the road. We're going to add more gravel to the main entrance. And when if you would see this main entrance now, this kind of cabin site or parking pad for your where you would park when you come here, it we're going to clean it up and make it a little bit bigger and make it a little bit easier to turn around in. And I think it would be a good spot for like a little, if you're gonna buy the farm and live at a distance, it's going to be a good spot to have one of those, to me, like a little tiny house or a combo shed, living quarters, barn dominium, if you will. It would be a great spot for that. It's close to the road. There's utilities and power and all that available at the road. So there's really not going to be a lot of negatives when we get done with it.
No, and I mean, you can be to Zanesville where there's all kinds of stuff to eat and stay, hotels, whatever. You can be to Zanesville in less than 25 minutes.
Yep. And there's a little. I had lunch one day down there. This is a little area called Philo. If you're familiar with Muskingum County, this is a little area called Philo, or at least that's what the address usually is Philo. But there's a little wing join and just a couple things there close anyway. So I mean, you're not roughing it. Nice area, of course. If you're a fisherman, I think it goes without saying, the Muskingum River is real close to there, and there's tons of muskie fishing going on now as we're recording this video. Brian Tanner, a friend of mine, he's out there slaying them as we speak, I would guess, but. Just lots to do there. A nice area, good road system to that farm. It's a pavement road right up to the entrance of that farm. Those are things I really like. If you're not talking about pothole mud roads for miles getting back to the place. I mean, it's a nice. It's got a nice feel. So, this one, if you're a decent hunter, I think you're gonna have lots of opportunities on this one. There's organically more sign and just better quality genetics there than I've seen in a good while. And I've not been to some of the spots that Javen and Ben hunt a little north of us, but these are pictures from just corn piles on this farm and tree stands being hung last year. No, nothing, no road system cleanup, no food plots, no nothing, no intentionality, if you will, with how to hunt this place or how to set it up. And it has some real good deer. So
that's what I literally told my wife when I was setting up the web page here. I was like, man, I maybe I hope we don't sell it before the fall.
Yeah, I think we've all been kind
this
of
is a good
that.
piece. There's somebody's gonna be on some good deer here for sure.
Yeah, and I can tell you guys with confidence, the guy that I bought the farm from, his name's Russ. He's a good dude. We've been friends for years. And he didn't kill a deer here. I think he hit a deer that they didn't successfully recover, but I don't even think it was a lethal hit. So, I mean, everything that you guys are seeing, if you've watched this far in the video, everything you're seeing here are deer that have shed out. Either, if we know, these are deer that could be fair game next year, even bigger. And there were some 60+ class deer on this place. Javen, there's that deer that has all these tines. There's so many bucks on this farm, but there's this one that has just funky tines. I think the deer might be 4, and he would be the kind of deer I think could blow up next year. He'd be the number one target come July to try and see if you could get eyes on this deer. He's a dandy. So it's
that food
it's
plot
kind of bittersweet.
That food plot and grass is going to completely change that place. Not change it, but it's going to be crazy to see what it'll. And you may never have to hunt another spot on the whole entire farm.
Yep.
Honestly.
Yeah, and I love your idea of clover, because the thing that I would add, we've all done this, I'm sure, but I always love doing the fall food plots. Love it. But on a farm like this, if you're going to have one food source that's potentially going to get hammered every year, I don't think there's a more tolerant or hardy source than clover that deer can really hit it hard, and they're just not going to mow it. If they mow it, then it's obviously way too small. But I think we're going to give the new owner a really good head start with it not being too small. With us getting this dozer work done starting this week, we'll get that spring food plot in there. I'm at perfect timing. I think, man, come opening day of bow season, this farm is going to have a major facelift, having already been completed.
Yep. And if you'll notice on the clover plot, we put that little bend in it, that little pinch, just a tad, to kind of make that a shootable distance across.
Yep.
So like they're kind of coming through there, and I would put maybe a scrape tree right out in front of that blind, like right there. Like maybe leave. There's a tree to leave, or we'd have somebody plant, like tell them, like, look, drill a hole in the ground, put a big scrape tree here every year, or a rubbing post, something.
Yep. Yep, 100%. And you, Ben, you saw this, I'm sure, when we were there. There's a lot of deer that are entering that because they're following these contour lines. But as that ditch, heads out at the top there behind the blind, the deer are coming into that from the northeast out of that
Yeah,
picture and the
100%.
southwest. That's
Yeah.
already their loop. So that's it's going to be really good. I think this is the perfect scenario. Like you said, there's a few food plots you could add if you wanted to get really crazy and maybe bring in some topsoil or try to get creative. You could get a plot in that southwest corner, but you just don't need it. I mean, literally, I think $3 over 150 could have had the chance to be harvested on that one farm last fall, and I would think you guys would agree that's not common to be able to say on 110 acres.
No, not anymore.
So, well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Obviously, if you've watched this far, this farm is actively listed as kind of a pre-market available farm. This farm is on land.com. Obviously, if you're on the website or you're on YouTube, you can check more details out at our website. This one's 109 acres in Muskingum County, Ohio, south of Zanesville. It's a really, really good piece. And I think what we've talked about is the things that we're going to do are just going to make it that much better. We're going to give that new buyer a really good foot forward. Man, there's that water bridge. I can't even tell you how exciting it is to see that thing from the drone pictures. But this one's going to be available. It's available now. If you're watching this and you're interested in working with us pre-market, I will say, and this is not a pitch for us. This is not a pitch. I think Ben will agree that if we're able to work with a buyer previous to this thing coming to the open market, it really provides a unique opportunity where we can semi-tailor things to what your needs may be because we've got our equipment there already. We've got an open canvas already, and we can obviously come to terms on an agreement with the farm, and there may be things you want done that we've now got the means to do that can be wrapped up in the financing all at once. Or, if you're buying it cash, we can do all the work all at once, which would save you enormous time, effort, and it would keep us better streamlined. Agree, Ben?
Yeah, 100%. Or if somebody wants to buy it and we don't do a thing to it and they want to do their own, that'd save money because then you wouldn't have to pay. We don't have to pay the excavating costs, but that's going to happen pretty quick if somebody's got a buzz. Tell them what the asking price is while you have it up.
Yeah, as of today, as of recording this video, we're live at $599, $599.9. And I want to tell you guys, I'm going to do some math here because I want to go back to this point we talked about in the beginning. For $599.9, if you were paying that price divided by the 109 acres, it's $5,500 an acre. Okay, Ben, tell me, did you not go to an auction in Muskingum County over the summer of farm ground that was stripped, or not farm ground, but
it was just like auction? It was a lot of stuff just like this, strip ground. It was a bigger property, but if I remember right, well, I know for a fact because there was parcels we were interested in as far as the timber company I buy for, that had some okay timber on it. But there was sections that sold for $9 an acre, $12 an acre, that had frontage. Some of the stuff that didn't have frontage was bringing $6,500 an acre, no mineral rights. So it was a lot higher than. I mean, I honestly expected to go there and maybe pick some up for $4,500 an acre, and that didn't happen.
So if you were to pay our asking price, we roll this plan out or we don't, we would take a reduction in that price if we didn't have to do any of the work. But like Ben said, so we had a title issue on this farm. And this is another reason I think buying from us is an advantage, is this farm had a title issue that the previous owner didn't know about. And it took us time to fix it and get a new title policy and get clear title. So these are also the things that we do when we bring a property to the market. We get all the nonsense fixed. Had we not had the title issue, we would have already brought this to market almost 2 months ago, but we had to wait for this to be fixed. So with that, we're already getting started on our plan. But if you were to buy this from us prior to all that, obviously we would negotiate a discount because we've got a pretty good chunk of money tied up in what we're going to do to make improvements to it. And again, even just thinking out loud here, I mean, these redneck blinds, I think, if you go and Google this yourself, you're talking $4,000 on the low side a piece. So if we go ahead and do these and bring them into the farm, you're talking on the low side an $8,000 value add to the farm that you get all in one price. I think 5,500 an acre is extremely reasonable. We've seen ground go for much higher than that, but again, we are trying to provide a good product to the market with a great brand. So, we've seen some of the comments.
Opinion, this close to Columbus and Zanesville, it's a great price. I don't think it'll last.
So, well, that's our bet from our buddy Brian Tanner. Brian says this will last 3 weeks. So, if you guys have watched anything we've done, like the one we did in Meigs County, this farm, it would have a similar feel to some of the things we did in Meigs, but the Meigs buyers are friends of mine now, so, and I'm sure they're going to be watching this, but if you had to just tell me, all right, any of the farms you've ever done, you can't touch them. You just have to go hunt a stand for 3 days. You can pick any of the farms you've ever done, and you need to have a chance at shooting a booner.
This one. Right here.
This one.
It's this
period.
One.
So, you heard it first. But anyways, guys, I appreciate your guys' time. We've gone a little bit over an hour. Reach out to us if you have questions. I'm excited to bring this one to the market. We've already got things where you can see it. We're kind of teasing what's going on, but hopefully this has been a more comprehensive look at what we obviously try to do to be intentional and what we're doing on this one specifically.